That night, silence broke in a place where silence was law. It did not shatter with gunfire. It did not scream. It arrived softly, wearing worn shoes and trembling hands. And in those hands was a wallet. Old, cracked, forgotten. But inside it was something powerful enough to bring a king to his knees. The restaurant was closing. Not the loud kind of closing with clattering chairs and impatient managers, but the slow, tired unraveling of a long night. Plates stacked, lights dimmed, conversations fading into echoes. Catherine wiped the last table by the window. No one noticed her. No one ever did. That was the thing about being invisible. You learned how to move without disturbing the world. You learned how to listen, to observe, to understand what others ignored. Catherine was a waitress. 26. Working double shifts to pay rent in a city that never cared if you slept or not. Her uniform was simple, black, clean, forgettable. Her expression, always calm. But behind that quiet stillness lived something sharp. A mind that noticed patterns. A memory that held details others lost. A woman who understood more than she ever said. Catherine. The manager's voice snapped across the room. Yes? Private room. They're still inside. Finish up. She hesitated. The VIP room? Don't ask questions. Just go. Of course. She always went. Because people like Catherine didn't get to refuse. The hallway to the private room was darker than the rest of the restaurant. Quieter. Heavier. Like the air itself knew something important lived beyond that door. She paused for a second. Then knocked. No answer. She pushed it open. The room was not empty. It was wrong. The lights were still on. A chair lay tipped over. A glass shattered on the floor. And on the far side, a man. Collapsed. Not moving. Catherine froze. Every instinct told her to step back. To close the door. To pretend she had seen nothing. Because in this city, people who saw too much disappeared. Then she noticed something else. A child. Standing near the wall. A little girl. Maybe 10. Clutching something to her chest like it was the only thing keeping her from breaking apart. Her eyes locked onto Catherine. Wide. Red. Unafraid. You shouldn't be here, Catherine whispered. The girl didn't move. He said someone kind would come. Catherine frowned. Who? My papa. Her voice didn't shake. That was the unsettling part. Children cried. Children panicked. This one endured. Catherine stepped closer to the man on the floor. Her training, something she never talked about, kicked in instantly. She knelt. Checked his pulse. Nothing. Her jaw tightened. Too late. Behind her, the girl walked forward slowly. He told me, if something happened, I had to give this to someone powerful. She held out the object. The wallet. Old leather. Edges worn thin. Catherine stared at it. Why me? The girl tilted her head. He said, you would listen. Before Catherine could respond, the door opened. Everything changed. Men entered. 3 of them. Well-dressed. Dangerous in the quiet way. Not loud violence. Controlled violence. The kind that didn't need to shout. And behind them, he walked in. Thomas. The air shifted when he entered. It always did. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Power followed him like a shadow. Tall. Composed. Eyes that missed nothing. A man people feared, not because he was cruel, but because he decided when cruelty ended. His gaze swept the room once. The body. The broken glass. Catherine. The girl. Then he spoke. Who called this in? No one answered. Because no one had. His eyes landed on Catherine. Explain. This was the moment. The moment most people broke. Stuttered. Apologized. Bowed. Catherine didn't. She stood. Slowly. Met his gaze. And said, he's dead. The room went still. One of the men stepped forward angrily. You don't speak to him like. Thomas raised a hand. The man stopped instantly. Thomas kept looking at Catherine. Not past her. Not through her. At her. Continue. That was it. No threat. No dismissal. Just. Continue. And something shifted. Invisible. But real. Catherine pointed slightly. The glass is broken inward, not dropped. There was force. She stepped toward the table. Two people, one standing here, one there. She moved with certainty. The argument escalated. Her voice remained steady. The man on the floor, he wasn't attacked immediately. He collapsed after. Thomas watched. Silent. Focused. Listening. She picked up a small shard of glass. There's residue. She looked up. Poison. The room tightened. One of the men cursed. Another reached for his phone. Thomas didn't move. Go on. Catherine gestured toward the girl. She's been here the whole time. The girl nodded. They argued. Then Papa drank. Then he fell. Thomas's gaze shifted to the child. And softened. Just barely. Come here. The girl didn't hesitate. She walked straight to him. Fearless. She held up the wallet. This was in Papa's pocket. Thomas took it. Casually. At first. Then, his fingers froze. Something about it. Something familiar. Where did he get this? The girl swallowed. He said if anything happened, I had to find you. The room stopped breathing. Thomas opened the wallet. Slowly. Carefully. Like it might explode. Inside. A folded piece of paper. Old. Creased. Handled many times. He unfolded it. And read. No one spoke. No one moved. Catherine watched his face. Because faces told the truth people tried to hide. At first. Nothing. Cold. Controlled. Then. A crack. His jaw tightened. His breath changed. His eyes. Shifted. And then. Something no one in that room had ever seen before. Thomas dropped to his knees. The sound echoed louder than a gunshot. The most powerful man in the room. The man no one questioned. The man who decided life and death. Was kneeling. The letter trembled in his hand. And for the first time. His voice broke. No. Catherine didn't understand yet. But she knew this. Power had just changed direction. And whatever was written in that letter. It was stronger than fear. The room did not breathe. Not a whisper. Not a movement. Because when a man like Thomas fell to his knees, the world paused to understand why. The letter trembled in his hand. Not from weakness. From memory. Catherine stood still watching. Not intruding. Not interrupting. She had learned long ago there were moments where truth unfolded on its own. And this was one of them. Thomas read the letter once. Then again. Slower. Like each word carried weight he could not escape. Finally. He spoke. But not to anyone in the room. To me. His voice was low. After all this time. He closed his eyes. And the past something he had buried beneath power, money, and blood rose without permission. Years ago. Before the suits. Before the empire. Before fear had a name. There had been two boys. Hungry. Cold. Forgotten. One of them had been Thomas. The other. A man named Daniel Hayes. Thomas exhaled slowly. He saved my life. The words fell into the room like truth no one could challenge. The men exchanged glances. They had never heard this. Not once. Thomas never spoke of his past. Because men like him did not survive by remembering softness. But now. He had no choice. Back then, I wasn't this. He gestured vaguely around him. I was nothing. His gaze drifted not at the present but somewhere far behind it. There was a night, an alley. 5 men. His voice hardened. I should have died there. Catherine listened carefully. Not just to the words. But to the spaces between them. He stepped in. Thomas's grip tightened around the letter. Didn't hesitate, didn't think. A pause. He took the knife meant for me. Silence swallowed the room again. Catherine's eyes flickered to the girl. The connection forming. Thomas opened his eyes. They said he wouldn't make it. A bitter breath. But he did. He laughed. Once. Without humor. And I told him I'd repay it. His voice dropped. I didn't. The confession hung heavier than anything else. I built everything. His tone sharpened. Everything. But I never went back. Catherine felt something shift inside her. Not sympathy. Understanding. Because power often came with a cost. And sometimes, that cost was the people you forgot. Thomas looked down at the letter again. Then, slowly, he read aloud. Thomas, if you are reading this, then I ran out of time. I didn't want to bring you back into this world. You fought too hard to rise above it. But I had no one else. No one I trust. My daughter, her name is Eliza. She doesn't know your world. Don't let her become part of it. They're coming for me. Not because I stole from them, but because I refused to stay silent. There are things buried in their system. Accounts, names, deals. People who think they're untouchable. I left everything where they will never look. And I left her with the only man I believe still remembers what loyalty means. If there is anything left of the boy I knew, protect her. Not because you owe me, but because she deserves better than the life we survived. Daniel. The last word echoed. Thomas lowered the letter slowly. No one spoke. Because there was nothing to say. Catherine felt it clearly now. This wasn't about crime. This wasn't about power. This was about a promise. The little girl stepped forward. You knew him, didn't you? Thomas looked at her. Really looked this time. Her eyes. Same quiet strength. Same refusal to break. Yes. His voice was softer now. I knew him. She nodded. As if that was enough. He said, if I found you, everything would change. Thomas closed his eyes briefly. Everything already had. Behind him, one of his men spoke carefully. Boss, we need to move, if this is connected. Thomas stood. Slowly. Deliberately. And when he did, the air changed again. Not back to what it was. Something different. Seal the building. His voice carried authority again. But now, he carried purpose. No one leaves. No one enters. Another man hesitated. And the police. They will not come. Thomas didn't even look at him. Because they never did. His eyes moved to Catherine. And this time, there was no dismissal in them. You. She didn't flinch. Yes. You saw everything. Yes. You spoke. A pause. Yes. Thomas studied her. Carefully. Most people in her position would have stayed silent. Walked away. Protected themselves. She didn't. Why? Catherine didn't hesitate. Because someone needed to. The room stilled again. Simple answer. Dangerous answer. Thomas nodded once. As if confirming something to himself. Then, unexpectedly, he said, Stay. Catherine blinked. That wasn't a request. She understood. The men shifted. Not liking this. But no one argued. Because Thomas had already decided. He turned to one of his trusted men. Find out who Daniel was working for. We already know. I want everything. His tone sharpened. Every name, every transaction, every connection. And the girl? Thomas looked at her. Then, without hesitation, she stays with me. The words landed like law. The girl didn't react. She simply stepped closer to him. As if she had already chosen. Catherine noticed that. Children knew. Instinctively. Who would protect them? Thomas crouched slightly. Not fully. But enough. What's your name? Eliza. He nodded. Eliza, you are safe now. She searched his face. Not trusting words. Measuring truth. Then, quietly. Okay. And that was it. No tears. No relief. Just acceptance. Catherine felt something tighten in her chest. This child had already lived through too much. Thomas stood again, then turned back to Catherine. "You're not leaving?" She met his gaze. "I didn't plan to." Another pause. Something unspoken passed between them. Respect. Not earned through status. Through action. Suddenly, a phone rang. One of the men answered. His expression changed instantly. "Boss." He swallowed. "They know." Thomas didn't ask who. He already knew. "They're moving." "How many?" "Unknown." A beat. But fast. Catherine spoke before she could stop herself. "Then they're not here for recovery." Every head turned toward her. "They're here to erase evidence." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Her voice stayed steady. "They poisoned him because he knew something." She gestured toward the body. "They didn't search the room." A beat. "They're coming back." Silence. Then, Thomas nodded. "Prepare." His voice turned cold again. Controlled. Precise. This time, it wasn't just power. It was direction. Lockdown. The men moved instantly. Weapons checked. Doors secured. Lights dimmed. The restaurant transformed. Not into a business. Into a fortress. Thomas looked at Catherine one last time. "You see things others don't." She didn't answer. Because that had never been a gift. It had been survival. He nodded slightly. "Stay close." And for the first time, Catherine realized something dangerous. She was no longer invisible. She had stepped into a world where silence was safer. And she had chosen to speak. Outside, sirens didn't come. But something else did. Engines. Dark. Fast. Unstoppable. And inside, a waitress. A child. And a man who had just remembered who he used to be. Prepared for a war none of them had planned. But none of them would walk away from. The engines stopped all at once. Not gradually. Not hesitantly. Abrupt. Like a decision already made. Inside the restaurant, no one spoke. They didn't need to. Men like Thomas's didn't panic. They calculated. Catherine stood near the edge of the room, her hands still, her breathing controlled. But her mind was moving. Fast. Too fast. "They're not here to negotiate," she said quietly. One of the men scoffed. "Of course they're not." Thomas raised his hand again. Silence. "Why?" He didn't look at his men. He looked at her. Catherine didn't hesitate. "Because they already killed him." She gestured toward Daniel's body. "You don't negotiate after that." A pause. "They're here to remove what's left." Thomas nodded slowly. "Evidence." "Yes." Another pause. Then, "Or witnesses." The word lingered. Heavy. The little girl Eliza tightened her grip on the edge of Thomas's coat. He didn't move her hand away. Instead, he spoke. "Take her to the back." One of the men stepped forward. No." The word cut through the room. Thomas looked at Catherine. "You." Catherine blinked. For a brief second. Uncertainty flickered. Then, it was gone. "Come on," she said gently to Eliza. The girl didn't move. Not immediately. She looked up at Thomas. A silent question. He gave the smallest nod. That was enough. She took Catherine's hand. And just like that, trust shifted again. Catherine led her down the narrow hallway. Past the kitchen. Past the staff door. To a small storage room. Not safe. But safer. "Stay here," Catherine said. Eliza didn't let go of her hand. "You'll come back?" Catherine crouched. Met her eyes. Yes. No hesitation. No promise she couldn't keep. Just truth. Eliza studied her. Then, slowly, she nodded. Catherine closed the door. And turned back. Her heart beat faster now. Not from fear. But from knowing something had already begun. She walked back into the main room. Thomas hadn't moved. But everything else had. Men were positioned. Lights adjusted. Weapons no longer hidden. The illusion of normalcy. Gone. Positions, Thomas said calmly. Then, to Catherine. Stay behind me. She didn't argue. But she didn't obey fully either. She stepped to the side instead, where she could see everything. Thomas noticed. Said nothing. The door opened. No knock. No hesitation. 5 men entered. Different from before. Not polished. Not subtle. These were not negotiators. These were finishers. Their eyes scanned the room instantly. Calculating. Measuring threats. Then, their leader stepped forward. You shouldn't have gotten involved. His voice was flat. Cold. Thomas tilted his head slightly. I wasn't given a choice. A faint smile. There's always a choice. Yes, Thomas said. There is. The man's gaze shifted. To the body on the floor. Then. To Catherine. Then. Back to Thomas. Where is it? Thomas didn't answer. The man sighed. Unfortunate. He lifted his hand slightly. And everything broke. The first shot shattered the glass behind the bar. Chaos didn't explode. It unfolded. Fast. Precise. Thomas moved before the second shot fired. Catherine saw it. Not just strength. But control. He wasn't reacting. He was anticipating. One man went down instantly. Another disarmed. A third forced back. This wasn't a brawl. It was dominance. Catherine didn't freeze. She moved. Not toward safety, but toward understanding. Her eyes scanned the room. The positions. The angles. And then, she saw it. One man. Not attacking. Watching. His hand near his jacket. But not drawing. Not yet. Behind you, Catherine shouted. Thomas turned instantly. The man fired. Too late. Thomas deflected the shot. Closed the distance. Ended it. Silence followed. Not peace. Just. Pause. 2 attackers remained. One dropped his weapon. The other didn't. Last chance, Thomas said. The man laughed. You don't understand. He reached slowly into his pocket. Catherine's voice cut through again. Don't let him. Too late. He pressed something. Not a weapon. A trigger. The lights flickered. Then died. Darkness. Complete. A beat. Then. A distant sound. Click. Catherine's breath caught. That wasn't for here, she said. Thomas's voice was calm. Explain. That was a signal. A pause. They're not done. And then. From outside. An explosion. The ground shook. Glass shattered. The kitchen door blew inward. Smoke poured in. This wasn't an attack. It was a purge. Move, Thomas ordered. His men responded instantly. Catherine ran. Not blindly. With purpose. To the storage room. She threw the door open. Eliza. The girl was there. Curled in the corner. But awake. Alert. They're destroying the building, Catherine said. Eliza stood immediately. No questions. No hesitation. They moved. Back hallway. Kitchen. Fire spreading. Ceiling cracking. Thomas appeared through the smoke. His eyes found them instantly. Exit, he said. Not loud. But absolute. They ran. Through the back door. Into cold night air. Behind them. The restaurant burned. Not by accident. By design. Thomas stopped. Turned. Watched. Catherine stood beside him. Eliza between them. They wanted everything gone, Catherine said. Thomas nodded. But they failed. She looked at him. No, she said quietly. They didn't fail. A pause. They changed the battlefield. Thomas's eyes narrowed. She continued. They didn't find what they were looking for. Another pause. So now. Her voice dropped. They'll come for us. Silence. The fire roared behind them. Thomas looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, there was no distance. No hierarchy. Just recognition. You're right. A beat. Then. From this moment on you stay under my protection. Catherine shook her head. No. The word surprised everyone. Even him. I don't need protection, she said. A pause. I need truth. The air shifted again. Thomas didn't get angry. He didn't dismiss her. He listened. What truth? Catherine met his gaze. What did Daniel die for? Silence. Not empty. Heavy. Because that question was the beginning of everything, and the end of something far bigger. Thomas exhaled slowly. Then we find it. Behind them. The building collapsed. Flames swallowing what remained. Erasing evidence. Erasing the past. But not the letter. The girl. Or the woman who refused to stay silent. And somewhere, in the shadows beyond the firelight, someone was watching. Waiting. And preparing. For the next move. Fire burned behind them like a warning. Not of what had been lost, but of what had just begun. They didn't go to a hotel. They didn't call authorities. Men like Thomas didn't run toward systems. They operated outside them. The car arrived within minutes. Black. Silent. Expected. No one spoke as they got in. Not Catherine. Not Eliza. Not even Thomas. Because some moments required silence. Not out of fear, but out of calculation. The city passed in blurred lights. Catherine watched everything. Routes. Turns. Timing. She memorized without trying. Thomas noticed. You map things, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Why? Because people lie. She looked out the window. Patterns don't. A faint shift in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. Good. The car descended into an underground garage. Private. Secured. Invisible to anyone not invited. This was not just a safe place. It was a controlled one. They stepped out. Doors opened automatically. Men moved without speaking. Respect didn't need words here. Catherine followed Thomas and Eliza inside. The interior was vast. Minimal. Cold. Not a home. A command center disguised as one. Eliza stayed close. Not clinging. Just aware. Thomas turned to one of his men. No one enters this floor without my permission. Yes, boss. And bring me everything we have on Daniel Hayes. We already. Everything. The man nodded. Left. Thomas turned. Looked at Catherine. You asked a question. She didn't sit. Didn't relax. What did he die for? Thomas gestured toward the long table. Sit. She didn't. I'd rather stand. A pause. Then. He nodded. There. He placed the wallet on the table. Opened it again. There was more than the letter. He reached into the inner fold. And pulled out. A thin strip. Almost invisible. A storage chip. Catherine stepped closer. That's what they were looking for. Yes. Thomas placed it carefully on the table. They killed him for data. Catherine's mind moved instantly. Then it's not just money. No. Names? Yes. People in power? Thomas met her eyes. Yes. Silence. Because now. This wasn't crime. This was structure. Who can read it? She asked. Thomas paused. Someone I trust. A beat. Maybe. Catherine crossed her arms slightly. Maybe isn't enough. One of the men in the room stiffened. No one spoke to Thomas like that. But Thomas didn't react with anger. He leaned slightly against the table. What would you suggest? The question landed carefully. Because it wasn't dismissive. It was open. Catherine stepped forward. Redundancy. A pause. We don't trust one person. She pointed to the chip. We copy it. Another beat. We separate it. Thomas watched her. 3 locations minimum. Her voice stayed calm. No single point of failure. The room went still. Because this was not how a waitress spoke. This was strategy. Thomas exhaled slowly. You've done this before. Catherine shook her head. No. A pause. I've just seen what happens when people don't. That answer stayed in the room. Thomas nodded once. Do it. The order came instantly. Not questioned. Not debated. Because he had decided to trust her. And that changed everything. Hours passed. The chip was decrypted. Screens filled with data. Transactions. Accounts. Encrypted communications. And names. So many names. Catherine stood beside the analyst. Watching. Not overwhelmed. Focused. Scroll back, she said. The man hesitated. Thomas's voice came from behind. Do it. The data moved. Catherine leaned closer. There. She pointed. A pattern. Repeated entries. Different dates. Same structure. Shell companies, she said. Yes, the analyst confirmed. But look deeper. He did. Then froze. These aren't just financial. Catherine nodded. They're coordinated. Thomas stepped closer. Explain. She didn't look away from the screen. Money is moving through legal fronts. A pause. But it's tied to decisions. Another pause. Political ones. Silence. Heavy. Because now, this was no longer underworld business. This was power. Institutional. Protected. Who's behind it? Thomas asked. The analyst swallowed. There's a central node. Name. The man hesitated. Because some names weren't meant to be spoken. Thomas's voice dropped. Say it. The analyst exhaled. Victor Hale. The room changed. Not violently. Quietly. Because everyone there knew that name. Not a criminal. A reformer. A public figure. A man praised for integrity. Catherine's expression didn't change. But her voice did. Then he's the one they're protecting. Thomas looked at her. Or the one controlling it. A pause. Or both. Eliza's small voice came from behind them. Is he the one who hurt my papa? No one answered immediately. Because truth had consequences. Catherine turned. Knelt in front of her. We don't know yet. Eliza nodded slowly. But her eyes said something else. She already understood. Thomas watched that exchange. Then spoke. We move carefully. His tone was different now. Measured. Victor Hale isn't a man you attack. A pause. You expose him. Catherine stood. And we don't do it alone. Thomas looked at her. What do you mean? She met his gaze. We don't fight power. A beat. We turn it against itself. Silence. Then. Slowly. Thomas smiled. Not with amusement. With approval. Then you're not just staying. A pause. You're advising. Catherine didn't respond immediately. Because this was the midpoint. The moment where she stepped closer to power. And power accepted her conditions. She spoke carefully. I don't work for you. The room stiffened again. Thomas didn't. Then what do you want? Catherine's voice was steady. Transparency. A pause. No innocent people get hurt. Another. And Eliza's safety comes first. Silence. Because those weren't requests. They were terms. Thomas held her gaze. Long. Then. He nodded. Agreed. Just like that. Power. Bowed to principle. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But undeniably. Eliza stepped forward quietly. She slipped her small hand into Catherine's, and didn't let go. Thomas watched them both. Then turned back to the screen. Prepare everything. His voice returned to command. It's time. A pause. We don't hide. Another. We reveal. Outside. The city moved like nothing had changed. But inside, something irreversible had begun. A waitress had stepped into power. A child had brought truth. And a man who ruled through silence had chosen to listen. Morning came quietly. Too quietly. The kind of quiet that didn't belong to peace, but to pressure building beneath the surface. The city moved as it always did. Traffic. News. People chasing lives they barely understood. And somewhere inside that machine, a name was about to fall. Victor Hale. Respected. Untouchable. Untested. Until now. Inside the penthouse, screens flickered with controlled chaos. Encrypted messages. Data streams. Fragments of truth being assembled into something sharper. Something dangerous. Catherine stood at the center of it. Not commanding. Not dominating. But directing. Cross-reference the transactions with public contracts, she said. One of the analysts hesitated. That's going to take. Not long enough. Thomas, standing behind her, didn't interrupt. Didn't override. He listened. Because somewhere between the fire and the silence, he had already made a decision. She wasn't temporary. She was necessary. Eliza, Catherine said softly without turning. The girl was sitting near the window. Watching. Always watching. Come here. Eliza walked over. Calm. Present. Catherine crouched beside her. I need you to remember something. Eliza nodded. Everything your father told you, every name, every place, even the small things. A pause. Especially the small things. Eliza frowned slightly. Thinking. He said, sometimes the truth hides in boring places. Catherine's eyes softened. He was right. Thomas watched that moment. And something unfamiliar settled in his chest. Respect. Not for power. But for care. Boss. One of the men approached. Careful. We have a situation. Thomas turned. Say it. The man hesitated. Internal. Silence sharpened. Explain. There was an access attempt. A beat. From inside. Everything stopped. Catherine turned slowly. Who? The man looked uneasy. We're tracing it. No, Catherine said. Her voice cut through the uncertainty. Don't trace it. Thomas looked at her. Why? Because they want you to. A pause. They're testing how we respond. Another. Or they're already gone. Silence. Then. Thomas spoke. Lock internal channels. Orders moved instantly. No panic. Only precision. Catherine stepped closer to the main screen. Show me the access point. It appeared. A simple entry. Clean. Careful. Too careful. She stared at it. Then. Tilted her head. That's not theft. Thomas narrowed his eyes. What is it? Catherine exhaled slowly. It's a message. A beat. Someone is telling us they can reach us. Another. And they want us to know. The room tightened. Because this wasn't just danger. This was arrogance. Who has that level of access? Catherine asked. Thomas didn't answer immediately. Because the answer was simple. And dangerous. Someone I trust. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Catherine nodded slowly. Then we don't confront them. Thomas looked at her. Why not? Because they're not done. A pause. And if we move too early. Another. They disappear. Thomas considered that. Then nodded. Let them stay. A risky decision. But the right one. Hours later. The data was ready. Everything Daniel had died to protect. Organized. Verified. Weaponized. Catherine stood before the final screen. This isn't just evidence, she said quietly. Thomas stood beside her. No. It's exposure. A pause. An exposure is irreversible. So we choose the moment, Thomas said. Catherine nodded. Yes. Another pause. Public. Thomas's gaze sharpened. You're sure? She turned to him. If we do this quietly. A beat. They bury it. Another. If we do it publicly. She held his gaze. They can't. Silence. Then. Thomas nodded. Set it up. The plan formed quickly. Not sloppy. Not rushed. Deliberate. Victor Hale was scheduled to speak that evening. A public address. Broadcast live. Perfect. We don't interrupt, Catherine said. We let him speak. A pause. Then we show the truth. Thomas looked at her. And if he denies it? Catherine didn't hesitate. He will. A faint breath. That's why we don't accuse. Another. We reveal. Even Thomas felt it. The shift. This wasn't war. This was strategy. Evening arrived. The city lit up again. And so did the stage. Victor Hale stood before cameras. Confident. Polished. A man built on perception. Catherine watched from the control room. Eliza, she said softly. The girl stood beside her. You don't have to watch. Eliza shook her head. I want to. Thomas stood behind them both. Silent. Waiting. Victor Hale began speaking. About integrity. About reform. About justice. The words flowed easily. Because lies, practiced long enough, felt like truth. Now, Catherine said. The screens shifted. Not violently. Not dramatically. Smooth. Precise. Data appeared. Names. Transactions. Connections. Proof. Live. Unavoidable. Victor Hale stopped speaking. For the first time. He hesitated. The room watching him fell silent. Because truth does not shout. It stands. And waits. His smile faltered. Just slightly. But enough. What is this? He asked. Calm. Controlled. But not untouched. Catherine stepped forward. Activated the final sequence. Audio. Daniel's voice. Recorded. Clear. Naming him. The world shifted. Victor Hale's composure cracked. Just once. But once. Was enough. Back in the room. No one moved. Except Thomas. He stepped forward. Not to lead. But to stand beside Catherine. You were right, he said quietly. She didn't look at him. I know. Sirens began. Not hidden. Not denied. Public. Visible. Inevitable. Victor Hale stepped back. Not defeated yet. But exposed. And exposure was the beginning of the end. Behind them. A quiet voice spoke. I remember something. Eliza. Both of them turned. My papa said. She hesitated. If something happens, look at the people who smile the most. Silence. Catherine's eyes shifted. Not to the screen. To the room. And suddenly. She understood. We're not done. Thomas frowned. What do you mean? Catherine's voice dropped. There's another one. A pause. Inside. The room went cold. Because the real danger hadn't been outside. It had been standing beside them all along. Silence did not fall. It tightened. The screens still glowed with Victor Hale's unraveling image. Sirens screamed in the distance. The world was watching a man collapse in real time. But inside the room, a more dangerous truth had just surfaced. There's another one. Catherine's voice did not rise. It didn't need to. Thomas turned slowly. Say it clearly. Catherine's eyes moved across the room. Not randomly. Precisely. Faces. Postures. Breathing. Patterns. Then. She stopped. On one man. Marcus. one of Thomas's oldest lieutenants. Trusted. Loyal. Invisible. Until now. Marcus didn't flinch. Didn't reach for a weapon. Didn't panic. He smiled. Softly. And that was the confirmation. I was wondering when you'd notice, Marcus said calmly. The room shifted instantly. Weapons raised. Positions changed. Thomas didn't move. Explain. Marcus sighed. Always straight to the point. He took a slow step forward. Not threatening. Not afraid. Victor Hale isn't the system. A pause. He's just the face. Catherine's jaw tightened slightly. Then who is? Marcus looked at her. Almost impressed. You are, he said. Confusion flickered. For only a second. Then Catherine understood. Not me, she said quietly. Marcus smiled wider. People like you. A pause. The ones who believe truth changes things. Silence. Because that was the real war. Not money. Not power. Belief. Thomas stepped forward. You poisoned Daniel. Marcus didn't deny it. He was going to expose everything. A shrug. Couldn't allow that. Eliza's hand tightened around Catherine's, but she didn't cry. She just watched. The way children do. When they understand more than they should. Catherine spoke. You let him keep the evidence. Marcus tilted his head. Of course. A pause. It led me here. Everything clicked. The access. The signal. The timing. This was never about stopping us, Catherine said. Marcus nodded. It was about finding out how far you'd go. Thomas's voice dropped. You betrayed me. Marcus looked at him. Without guilt. You built a system, Thomas. A pause. I just used it better. The room held its breath. Because this was not just betrayal. This was inversion. Catherine stepped forward. No. Marcus looked at her. You didn't use it. A pause. You exposed it. Silence. Then. Thomas understood. This ends here, he said. Marcus laughed. No. A beat. This ends when people stop pretending power answers to truth. Catherine shook her head slowly. No. She stepped closer. Power answers to consequence. She turned. Activated something on the console. The screen changed again. Not to Victor Hale. To Marcus. Live. Everything. His access. His actions. His voice. Recorded. Marcus's smile faded. Just slightly. You planned this, he said. Catherine didn't deny it. You wanted to be seen. A pause. So I made sure you were. The room didn't explode. It settled. Into something final. Thomas walked forward. Stopped in front of Marcus. No anger. No rage. Just clarity. You were trusted. Marcus said nothing. You chose this. A pause. Marcus finally spoke. I chose reality. Thomas nodded once. Then. Quietly. You chose wrong. The doors burst open. Authorities. Real this time. Not controlled. Not delayed. Marcus didn't resist. He didn't need to. Because for the first time, he had been seen. And that was his defeat. As they took him away, he looked back at Catherine. Not with hatred. With recognition. You changed the rules. Catherine answered softly. No. A pause. I reminded them. The room emptied slowly. The screens dimmed. The noise faded. Only three remained. Thomas. Catherine. Eliza. The city outside moved on. It always did. But inside, something had ended. And something else had begun. Thomas walked to the table. The wallet still rested there. He picked it up. Held it carefully. Then. He turned to Eliza. This belonged to your father. She nodded. He knelt. Not halfway. Not partially. Fully. I failed him once. His voice was steady. But I won't fail you. Eliza stepped forward. Placed her small hand over his. I know. Simple. Certain. Catherine watched. And understood something deeper than power. This was what it meant to kneel. Not in weakness. In truth. Thomas stood slowly. Then looked at Catherine. You could have walked away. She nodded. I almost did. A pause. Why didn't you? Catherine looked at Eliza. Then back at him. Because silence would have been easier. A beat. And wrong. Thomas exhaled. Then, for the first time, he offered something he had never given freely. Stay. Not as an order. Not as protection. As a choice. You'll have everything. A pause. Money, position, influence. Catherine smiled faintly. Not tempted. Not impressed. I don't want power. Thomas studied her. Then what do you want? Catherine looked out at the city. Alive. Unchanged. I want it to matter. Silence. Then. Thomas nodded. Then help me change it. Another pause. Catherine didn't answer immediately. Because choice, real choice, was never rushed. Eliza tugged her hand gently. Stay. And that was different. Catherine looked down. At the child who had walked into fire. And survived it. Then back at the man who had knelt. And meant it. Finally. She said. On my terms. Thomas nodded. Always. Epilogue, quiet power. Months passed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Victor Hale's empire collapsed. Marcus disappeared into a system he once manipulated. And the network Daniel exposed. Unraveled piece by piece. Not because of force. Because of truth. Inside the same penthouse. Things were different now. Not softer. Stronger. Catherine stood by the window. Still quiet. Still observant. But no longer invisible. Eliza laughed somewhere behind her. Learning. Living. And Thomas. No longer just a man people feared. Had become something far more dangerous. A man who listened. Final reflection. Power does not fall when it is attacked. It falls when it is revealed. Silence is not weakness. It is often the space where truth waits. For someone brave enough to speak. And sometimes, the wrongest moment in a powerful man's life is not when others kneel before him, but when he kneels before what is right. If this story moved you, stayed with you, or made you think differently about power and truth, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more stories where silence breaks and the unexpected rises.